to meet you, brother. I love watching you grow up.
He's pulling down his pants. Put up your pants, my man.
Touchdown!
Is this the Tiger?
Fernando Tatis Jr., a grand slam.
Iguodala. It's funny to hear a female talk about routes. Like,
Pull up your pants, take off the bra, and be a man.
Welcome to From the Backseat, hosted by Clark and Ethan.
it's funny.
Welcome to From the Backseat. I'm your host, Ethan, and I'm joined today by my co-host.
What up, guys? Clark back again. A little amped up after that Bengals win this weekend. Great week of football. Cannot wait to dive right into things.
I know we got a lot to talk about, and this NFL week, we're starting to see everything kind of like piece itself together as the playoff race is starting to lose teams and kind of crunch down a little bit. But before we do, I hope everyone's fantasy matchups are going well. I had a huge week in fantasy football. So I'm absolutely stoked right now. So I hope those that are in playoff races are doing well. And those that are out, hopefully you're in a dynasty league and can make some moves to win.
Just make some moves. Think about next year. Build for the future. Try to rebrand. Who knows? Just get out there and grind.
Yeah, you just got to make some moves. I mean, at some point, if your team sucks right now, you might as well go do something to make it not be so
just
bad.
Dump everything. I don't know. If you're in a dynasty league, try to trade for some draft picks there. See what you can find.
Yeah. Or maybe just try to like really offer someone for like an older player that might be good next year.
Who knows? Something.
Yeah. Or go get Javonte Williams. Maybe you could get Javonte Williams for cheap since he's been injured all year coming off an ACL.
Try to go out there and get Jordan Love. You could go out there and get Jordan Love.
You could go out and get Jordan Love. And so why don't we start our week 12 wrap up with that man, Jordan Love. So Jordan Love came in pretty much in the fourth quarter of last night's game. And I think almost immediately actually looked better than Rodgers.
I mean, I think the reason maybe he looked better, I think obviously Philadelphia kind of felt like they maybe had that game wrapped up. Maybe not quite as much, but the thing for me, I think from that is that that maybe shows how injured Rodgers truthfully is. I mean, he clearly looks like he had some sort of oblique injury last night. The thumb has been broken since week 3. But that's just kind of the way it's going. I think, though, for Love, you saw a ton of what he can be, his ability to move. The arm has some serious zip on that ball. There was a lot to like. I mean, I know his one big touchdown might have clustered up some stats from Christian Watson. But, I mean, that's a guy who can play, too. But I think if you're a Packers fan, you have to feel better about Jordan Love than you probably did entering the season after seeing that last night. And I got to be honest, I think last night might have been the last time we see Aaron Rodgers as a Packer ever.
Yeah, I mean, his contract's a little tough to get out of, which will make it a little bit
He might just
more
call it quits, though.
I know. I don't really – I just don't think he goes out on this note. I think he actually might try to get traded.
I mean, he might try to get traded, but here's my thing with it is that I don't know if they're going to have much luck with it. I mean, I really feel like Rodgers – the way he's kind of acted in recent years, it makes it feel like as if he would be content walking away. But I don't know. It just felt like certainly last night is the last time we're going to see Rodgers this year. And I feel like in some ways it might be the last time we ever see him.
Yeah, I have to tend to agree. I mean, Rodgers has been dealing with this injury. He had his thumb, which I guess he's been dealing with all year. And then last night he hurt was it his hip or his
It looked like an oblique or a hip injury, something like that.
Yeah, so then he went into the locker room. Jordan Love came in and, again, kind of made it a game with the Eagles. He gave him a shot, which the Packers offense was moving the ball well in the first half, wasn't really moving it well in the second half. But as you mentioned, Christian Watson, I mean, the speed, size right now,
he looks like top end. I mean, you saw last night, the guy that he outran runs a 4.38 and he just dusted him. Absolutely dusted him.
I mean, he was a project coming out of college. A lot of people had him really high on their boards. There's a reason the Packers went and spent 2 second rounds. I mean, a lot of Packers fans were down on him because of the drops, but I mean, a lot of young wide receivers have drop issues early in their career.
Well, here's the thing too, that I kind of look at if you're the Packers right now. So first off, I saw this last night. I want to bring this up because this is almost like too crazy of a coincidence not to touch on. But almost 15 years exactly to the date, on November 29th, 2007, Aaron Rodgers replaced an injured Brett Favre. That was 15 years ago against Dallas. And then now almost 15 years later on the dot, off by 2 days, Jordan Love replaces an injured Aaron Rodgers. That's pretty crazy. I'm not saying it's going to work out the same way, but that's almost like one of those things where like, holy crap, that's some serious deja vu.
I mean,
But
the other thing is if Jordan Love works out, like even if he's just an average quarterback, I think we could already crown the 2020 quarterback class like best in history with 5 starting caliber quarterbacks.
I mean, here's the thing with Love. I don't think there's going to be much of a middle ground for him. I feel like with the way that he's going, it's either going to be, okay, this guy's a top 10 dude and he has all the characteristics of what you want in a starting quarterback, or it's going to be like he's a guy that you just sat there and said, hey, all the intangibles, all the measurables that you want, but he just couldn't figure it out. I feel like that's the way his career is going to go. But I agree. If he does work out and he plays at the level that he's at talent-wise, the 2020 NFL draft class by quarterbacks is by far probably at this point looking like the most successful ever in NFL history. I mean, you have all pros right now up and down the list of guys taken.
Yeah, because right now it's probably 2004 is the most successful with Rivers, Eli, and Ben Roethlisberger, which, I mean, is 3 Hall of Fame.
That's 3 Hall of Fame guys.
3 Hall of Fame guys that played over 15 years in their career, all respectively. But to have, you're not going to end up having 5 guys. I mean, I love Jalen Hurts right now, but Jalen Hurts is not going to have the longevity and probably the wherewithal of some of these other guys. But he's still playing at a really high level right now. And I think we could see 3 top end guys plus then one of these other dudes being pretty serviceable.
Yeah. I mean, right now, I think your obvious hits, I would say at this point would be Burrow and Herbert. And I think you really can make an argument at this point for Tua. We'll talk about him a little bit more later, but there's 3 guys. You're like, okay, legit. This is serious. We're seeing it. Hurts, I think, is really close to that too. Again, I think my only concern with him is that I know Sirianni loves to run him, but you got to at some point ease off that gas pedal a little bit. Even, it works so well. But overall, I just think right now, this 2020 draft class just looks absurd in terms of the quarterback position. It's crazy.
Man, it just looks insane. I mean, just really good. Justin Herbert, obviously, if we're talking about 2020, had a bounce back game. I think a lot of people would consider. Kind of got that monkey off his back.
Some people, I guess.
Yeah, needed game. I mean, the social media quarterback, which to all those Dolphins fans, like trying to act like Emmanuel Ocho is onto something and is a genius.
Not.
And
he's just using it as a talking point. He knows it gets traction. That's why he says it. There's no real credence to what he actually has to say if you just look at anything. It's just him getting clicks. He knows it works at this point.
The other thing is he keeps saying that he lives rent free in everyone's head. No, it's not that he lives rent free. It's just that he's dumb.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not living rent free if all you're saying is just rather moronic stuff. I mean, to live rent free is like someone just thinks about it constantly without you saying anything. But you're saying everything. So it's not rent free. It's just you being very loud and everyone knowing you're wrong. And
you say it every day. And you say it all the time.
I mean, good for him. I'll say that in terms of growing himself. Great for Emmanuel Acho. I mean, he has gotten more attention, I would say, in the last 3 weeks from this pivot, this take, than he probably has in his entire career in terms of sports talk. So,
I mean, it's not going to gain him respect, though. I mean,
but ultimately, really, does he? I mean, I don't know. I think Emmanuel Acho is a really good guy, actually. I think he's really well spoken. I think he's really articulate. I think it's just, I don't disagree. I just disagree with him on this one sentiment. I just think it's a little bit silly. I mean, we've been over this. I don't really know how you watch games, both Chargers and Dolphins, and you sit there and say, yeah, I'd rather have Tua over Herbert. It doesn't make much sense.
I mean, Tua's playing at a really high level
right now. He's playing great.
He's playing at a really high level, but just from a pure athleticism standpoint, which I also saw Richard Sherman today made a big thing about, like how Mike White is proving that teams shouldn't care about draft value and that potential for quarterbacks is like the biggest red flag in the world. And I'm like, okay.
Mike White after his second good NFL game.
Also, he played the worst secondary in the league. I mean, go around, ask once Eddie Jackson was out of the Bears secondary, who was another guy playing? I mean, I know Jacoby Brisker is out there, but for the average fan, who else knows who was playing for the Bears at that point.
No one really. I mean, the Bears are, I think, agreed upon. They traded away most of their very good players to the deadline. This is a team that's clearly in the rebuild. No, the Bears are not a litmus test. I mean, again, Mike White's an improvement because Zach Wilson was completely incompetent. I think it says more about Zach Wilson than it does about Mike White. And the thing is, too, is that I mean, if you're a Jets fan, like, yeah, be excited. Your team's playing really well, and your team can mask for subpar quarterback play. They've been doing it with Zach Wilson.
For sure.
But I'm still not going to sit here and be like, okay, I've seen 2 really good career games of Mike White now. He's the guy. He's the answer. That should be your savior. That's not how it works. The Jets are a good football team. But again, I think it says more about the play of Zach Wilson to this point in the year than it did about, Mike White.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the other thing is his big point was about draft position. Like, imagine if Mike White was drafted 2nd overall, like he would get every opportunity, whereas they're ready to pull him at any instance for Zach Wilson. And I'm like, well, yeah, obviously if you drafted a guy 2nd overall last year, you're going to give him every opportunity.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think at a very baseline analysis of that, the reason you give him so many opportunities is because you've invested so much more capital in him.
Yeah. It's so many resources.
It's the same for any sport. Like there's a reason 1st-round picks in Major League Baseball through the minor leagues get way more at bats. It's the reason they get way more opportunities. It's because there's been so much invested in them. You have to see what they are.
Also, GMs can lose their jobs over busted 2nd overall pick.
You don't want to see, a busted 2nd overall pick is a very big blemish. This isn't like, oh, we missed on a late 1st round guy. No, this is you missed on a franchise cornerstone. You missed on the guy that you said was going to change everything.
For sure. So Kelly has thrown in the chat a quick start bench cut that we'll do right now, and then we can move on.
Thank God.
Then we'll go back to it. So it's start bench cut, Thanksgiving food. So Clark, we just had Thanksgiving. Clark and I actually had Thanksgiving together for those listeners of the show.
Great little afternoon.
Yeah. So she says start bench cut, turkey stuffing, mashed potatoes. She says there's a right answer.
There's a right answer with this?
I guess.
I mean, it's hard to say there's a right answer because I feel like people can prepare each thing differently. Like there can be things that separate each one depending on whose Thanksgiving dinner you go to. For me, of those 3 options, though, I'm going to start turkey. I mean, turkey is the thing that everyone, I think, puts on their plate unless you go with ham, or if you're vegan, perhaps, and you just don't partake in it, that's fine too. Maybe you have something else, but I'm starting turkey. I'm always a bigger fan of turkey. Sitting mashed potatoes. I think mashed potatoes is a solid part of the plate that just kind of brings everything together. I'm a bigger fan of sweet potatoes any day of the week, though. Mashed potatoes are fine. Give me sweet potatoes, or as yams, as some people call them. And I'm gonna cut stuffing. I know people love stuffing that my family makes. I am personally not a stuffing guy. Just don't do it. I don't really enjoy it that much. If you do, more power to you. But I'm cutting stuffing.
Wow, my list is completely different than yours.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm marrying stuffing. I think stuffing's the best thing. Actually, I mean, if mac and cheese was on there, I think mac is the best.
No, see, I'll be honest. And this is total. I don't think macaroni and cheese belongs at a Thanksgiving dinner.
It does. It's so good. It belongs on any meal.
I eat it. I'm not going to say no to it, but I think of all the things that are put down in the spread, macaroni and cheese is the one that I sit there and I say, hey, what is this doing here?
Well, so mine is start stuffing, benching turkey. I know. That's what I was thinking.
Cut.
Well, I know, but this isn't in sports terms. And then I'm cutting mashed potatoes. I'm not that big of a fan of mashed potatoes. Like if they weren't there, I would probably be fine without them.
I get like if you would put stuffing ahead, because I feel like mashed potatoes you can have with several different meals. This is not a Thanksgiving exclusive. I guess nor is turkey, because you can just do a turkey sandwich, but I don't know.
I mean, but
there's a lot of other ways I can see changing this.
Kelly saying down with mashed potatoes.
She what?
Kelly in the chat is saying down with mashed potatoes.
Well, that's unfortunate. Mashed potatoes are fine. I like mashed potatoes.
All right. Well, let's get back into it.
Yeah, seriously, Kelly, thanks.
Week 12. So week 12 kind of separated a lot of teams here. We started to see, I mean, maybe the biggest upset of the week, at least in my mind, is the Raiders scoring like 34 on Seattle and taking them to overtime. Josh Jacobs having 300 yards from scrimmage.
Yeah, I don't think the Raiders anticipated when they decided to decline his 5th-year option that he was just going to turn into Marshall Faulk, but I guess that's what happened.
I'm starting to think like maybe I'm underrating Josh Jacobs a little bit because he really belongs in this top running back conversation right now.
Well, because the thing is, it's wild to me about his production. Is I haven't looked closely enough at the efficiency of the Raiders offensive line, but this is a much maligned offensive line unit, I feel like.
Yeah.
And they're running the ball very well.
Well, what's really weird about their offense is, everyone crowns Derek Carr like he should be, but he has an easy 100-yard rusher almost every game.
I know.
And he's still not able to get it done.
Got lucky that Josh Jacobs busted off that 86-yarder at the end of the game.
Yeah, or they would have tied.
They probably would have. Buccaneers almost tied too. But yeah, look, I think the Raiders, it's an inconsequential win at the end of the day. They're not going anywhere.
No.
Seattle, again, I think Seattle, we've known this year just from watching them, the area that probably needs more work than anything else is the defense. So I think otherwise Seattle looks fine. I don't know if Seattle's a playoff team. Again, I think this is week 12 was kind of a, not necessarily a litmus test, but it separated the teams like, okay, you're good. You're going to you're going to fight for that playoff spot. For some teams, you're like, okay, maybe your record's a little bit diluted from what you actually are.
Yeah. For me, for all the people calling Seattle frauds, remember where they were. Well, remember what you thought of them before the season.
Yeah.
They're not frauds. They've already wildly exceeded expectations.
Yeah.
Like the fact that they're even in a conversation of a playoff team is crazy. A lot of people picked them to be the first overall pick, and I was kind of right in that boat with them.
I would say teams like Seattle, the Giants, I wouldn't go I don't think fraud's the right word. I think it's it's an earlier than expected.
Yeah.
Substantially earlier in some cases.
It's kind of the Bengals are a little bit different, but to me, it's kind of like the Bengals last year. The Bengals, not a lot of people had high expectations when they made the playoffs.
I saw a lot
year.
of people picking them dead last in the division. I remember that.
You know what I mean? Theo Ash picked them to go 2-15.
Happens.
But it's kind of that thinking of where a team is wildly underperformed. The Bengals are probably not the best example because they ended up going to the Super Bowl. And I don't think either of these two teams have the horses to take them there.
No.
But they're way ahead of schedule. They have extra picks. Seattle still has a top 5 pick from Denver that they're going to be able to cash in on whatever they want.
Seattle, no matter how the season ends up, is 100 times better than I think anyone, even an optimistic Seattle fan could have possibly predicted. I think a lot of people went into this season thinking Seattle, okay, the pick we got from Denver will be a late first rounder. Maybe we'll get the first overall pick if we're being honest. The guys we picked this last year's draft, maybe they'll work out. Instead, they found some studs like Tyler Woodley late in last year's draft. They have 6 or 7 wins at this point. They have 6.
They have 6.
6 and 5. No one thought that. Geno Smith looks very capable. And that pick that you thought was going to be a late first rounder is now turning out to be a top 5 pick at this point. And also, it looks like it's going to stay that way. You have a lot to be very hopeful about in Seattle.
The biggest thing for me with Seattle is for a team that had a horrible offensive line for years, they have a young unit who's already playing really well and is only going to improve at this point.
Yeah, honestly, in some ways, it's great to have a lot of really young, talented skill position players, but if you can build an elite young offensive line, I think it makes everything else so much easier because you always have that to lean on as an offense. You can run the ball. Whoever is back there is going to have enough time to get rid of it and find someone.
For sure. Yeah. Seattle's at a good place. So why don't we just dive into this NFC playoff picture? So we're talking about Seattle. We're talking about the Giants. So how do you see it right now? How do you see when we're done with the season? The craziest thing is your Super Bowl pick is pretty much already out of it.
They're dead. Unless Jordan Love just leads some sort of miraculous, generational, holy crap.
But they already have 8 losses, right?
They do. So they're dead. They are very dead. So I think with that one, I was being a little bit too bold. I thought this was going to be, some sort of Aaron Rodgers, revenge tour. There was it started off well, 3-1. You thought, wow, this might have a shot.
Yeah.
But no, that's dead. They're done. I think NFC wise though, in terms of the play, I think you kind of know who your division winners in a lot of cases are going to be. I think in the West, it's San Francisco. I don't really see much pushback the rest of the way. In the North, it's obviously Minnesota. The East is probably the division with the most question, I guess. But really, even then, the Eagles are what, 9-1 now, 10-1,
10-1.
So they pretty much have that wrapped up. They're 3 games up on just about everyone, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas has 3 losses, I think.
Yeah, and then I guess if we were to say the closest by technically everything, because it's 1 game, is the NFC South, but it's going to be the Buccaneers. I mean, I think it's a foregone conclusion. The Saints can't do anything. They got shut out for the first time since 2001, I believe, yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been a conversation had Atlanta beat the Commanders. I think then we might have talked about it a little bit more.
But even at that point, it would have been like, it still would not have been, in my mind, I'm still thinking, like, it's still Tampa Bay still is. So I think ultimately, yeah, you have your division winners set at this point. It's just going to be everyone else duking it out for a playoff spot
for
in
sure.
That wild card area.
So who's your let's talk about predictions for the wild card then.
So I think Dallas obviously gets one of them. That's pretty clear to me at this point. I don't see anyone else in the NFC South getting in. I really don't.
No, I don't either.
I don't see anyone else from the NFC North getting in.
I don't either.
In the NFC West, I still think Seattle finds a way in. I still think they've played well enough this season to where I don't think they're going to completely let it all go. I think even yesterday in their loss, there's still a lot of things you want to look at and say, okay, they did well. So I would say Seattle gets one of those spots. So I think one team is left, and you leave it up between the Giants and the Commanders in my mind. Those are the 2 teams it goes to. And this is a tough one. Really, I think it is. But I think ultimately who's going to end up taking it? I'm going to say I think Washington's going to end up winning it. I think Washington's going to get that final playoff spot.
See, I'm of the opposite opinion.
Yeah, I figured you would be, but I feel like for some reason it's going to work out where it's Washington. The Commanders get that spot.
You might be right. My issue is I don't know. I guess I'm thinking I'm like, I think I'd rather have. I think Saquon's just better than anyone on either offense right now.
I think that's true, but I think the one thing that I really like about Washington is the defense.
Yeah.
I think the defense will keep them in more games. Not to say the Giants don't have a good defense, but I think that defense of the Washington Commanders is going to be the difference that gets them into the playoffs in that last spot. They will be promptly bounced, but that will get them in.
I mean, the NFC right now is just so weak. I mean,
really, you have your one. I think realistically, at this point, you have your one team that's going to be in the. I mean, it's going to be between 2 teams. I'm sorry. I think really it's going to be an NFC Championship game between San Francisco and Philadelphia, and you figure it out from there.
The only 2 teams that can really fight them is Dallas, and I guess Minnesota, but I don't really believe in them. I believe in Dallas.
I don't believe in Minnesota either. Again, I think Tampa Bay could have a conversation just because Tom Brady's there, but I don't give it too much of value.
I don't give it that much of value right now. I mean, that whole team is just old, and Todd Bowles is clearly not.
Todd's not the guy. I like Todd Bowles. He's a great defensive mind, but it just doesn't look like it's working out as a head coaching spot.
No, I mean, it really shows how important Bruce Arians was.
Yeah, I think Bruce Arians, like, for whatever headbutting him and Tom Brady had with one another, he had more offensive-minded abilities. They were a better coach team. They were more explosive. I also think there's some other contributing factors. Like, I think Mike Evans has certainly lost a gear at this point.
Yep.
I think that's fairly obvious. So I just think they're slowing down a little bit. Julio Jones is certainly his age, which is sad to see. But that's just the way it is right now.
That's just the way it is. I totally agree. So is there anything else you want to talk about week 12 before we move into our segments?
Oh, well, I mean, of course, I have one thing I want to talk about in week 12.
What's that?
My Cincinnati Bengals, of course.
Okay, what do you want to talk about?
I think Cincinnati on Sunday showed a lot. I think it was a big win. I think they were favored in that game by Vegas, but I think it was a display of, I think Cincinnati in my mind right now is the 3rd best team in the AFC. I think they definitely have the capability to go ahead and beat Buffalo and Kansas City. It's something I've maintained. I think a big thing too with them is that they've shown that they can win in a lot of different ways. Like, they don't just need Burrow throwing it all over the yard. They can win running the ball. They can win playing defense. I think they do it extremely well. I think Sunday's game was a showcase of that, going into Nashville and beating perhaps the grittiest team, if that's any worth to you, in the AFC. So I look at them as the third best team probably in the AFC right now. I think it was just a big win for them. I think it's a huge confidence boost. I liked everything that I saw out of them.
Yeah, I thought it was a big win. My one thing is I think Tennessee's just worse than people are giving them credit for. I think their division just
tough. I just think that's a tough place to go into, and they always want to play their style of football. They're a tough defense.
For sure. I just think they get a benefit from playing in such a bad division.
No, they do, but I mean, like, they've been in a lot of games this year. They hung in with overtime with Kansas City, for God's sake, in Kansas City.
Yeah.
If they had Tannehill, maybe they win that game. But I think Tennessee, in terms of like, I think that was until that point considered one of the better teams of the AFC, and to go in there and take care of them, while they were trying to play their style of game was a big thing. I mean, the way that they shut down Derrick Henry was remarkable. So it was just, for me as a Bengals fan, it was pretty, it was great to see. I was definitely lifted up a little bit by that.
Yeah, it was a big win. I mean, the bigger showcase is if they can beat Kansas City next week.
Again, I think they certainly can. I mean, I don't have any doubt that they can do it. They did it twice last year. They just got to do it this year. And I think this team where the Bengals are right now is better this year than they were last year. It's almost in every stat, off efficiency, offensive wise and defensively, they're better.
I think I'm just thinking health wise. Like if Jamar Chase,
Jamar, if he's back, I mean, then you have basically Jamar and Joe are both back, Mixon. Then you have a big boost. I think the biggest thing, health wise, you're missing your number one guy in Awuzie. That hurts. Yeah. But I think otherwise they're relatively healthy across the board.
For sure.
But that would be the one spot. They were, I would think, last year one of the healthiest teams of football. They did not miss a lot of key contributors at any point.
For sure. So let's move in to our actual start bench cuts of the day. So we took one out of the book. So we got a couple start bench cuts to do. So where we're starting, Clark, is with another round of bad quarterbacks.
Oh God.
Maybe you think these guys are good.
Maybe. Probably not.
Start bench cut: Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, or Kenny Pickett.
Matt Ryan, Russell Wilson, and Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, which one do you like, Clark?
That's tough for all the wrong reasons. I'll tell you what. Immediately, I'm going to cut Matt Ryan. I think we've made the joke before. It's time to take Matt Ryan out behind the barn. I know we just put the Colts up by 1 point against Pittsburgh, but athletically, that guy's legs are shot. The arm strength is not there anymore. He's done. I know he had some great years in Atlanta, but he's toast. Between Pickett and Russell Wilson, that is like choosing if you would rather have, I don't know, a broken leg or a broken arm. It's not great either way at this point. I guess not taking contract situation into it and just basing it off merit. I guess I'll start Russell Wilson and I'll cut Kenny Pickett. I mean, Kenny Pickett's arm it's weak. He's not very good. I think this is a pick that Pittsburgh is going to look back and regret because it set him back a first round pick and maybe a year of rebuilding. And I guess I'll start Russ just because he has merit. I mean, this is a guy that was very good at some point. As to what happened with him, I have no idea. Maybe if he wasn't with Nathaniel Hackett, things would be a lot better. But right now, that would be my start is Russell Wilson. My bench is Kenny Pickett, and I'm cutting Matt Ryan and taking him out behind the barn, sadly, because he's tough.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, Kenny Pickett would not be very high on my list.
No.
All right, next one. We're going to go Dynasty Edition. Houston Astros, Kansas City Chiefs, or the Golden State Warriors?
Okay, well, one of those teams you just mentioned is not a dynasty.
Which one do you not think is a dynasty?
Kansas City is not a dynasty.
I think they're getting there.
You have to win multiple championships to be a dynasty in my eyes.
I know, but they've been in the AFC Championship game the last 4 years.
I know, and that's really that's really cool. But I feel like dynasty, for that word to exist, there has to be multiple championships hoisted. So off that alone, I will cut the Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay.
And then from there, I will bench the Houston Astros because they only have 2 championships during that time. And then I will go ahead and make some Bay Area folks happy and go ahead and start the Golden State Warriors. This is a team that for the last 10 years, not maybe a little bit shorter than that, has been just a world beater in the NBA. Not as great as the look this year, but championship after championship, it felt like every other year. So I'd start them. So it could be a different conversation next year because I do believe Houston's, after signing Jose Abreu today, is looking like they might just get their third next year. Go back to back.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
All right, our next one is head coaching edition. Start bench cut: Sean Payton, Bill Belichick, or Andy Reid?
That's really tough.
Where are you going?
I feel like you have to start. He can't not start Bill Belichick. You have to start Bill Belichick.
I would go the same way.
I know there's a lot of people who go out there and argue and say, "Oh, it's Brady. Brady was the key to it," but he still won and found success without him. Obviously, it's not quite the same, but I would still say he's the greatest coach in NFL history. I would start him. Then between the next two, I would bench Andy Reid. I think off of play calling and offensive minded alone, Andy Reid is probably the brightest that the NFL has ever seen. Kansas City's offense, Philadelphia's offense is constant. Whenever he coached either of those teams, explosive plays left and right. He's a guy, I believe in my mind, you certainly would have to bench in this scenario. If it was anyone other than Belichick, I think he'd have a really good case to start. And then cutting Sean Payton. No disrespect to Sean Payton, because I think Sean Payton's a great coach. He did a ton in New Orleans. You see how bad that team and kind of organization looks right now without him. But I think of the two guys you just named before, he'd be the odd man out in my eyes. So I would go ahead and cut Sean Payton as hard as it is because I like Sean Payton. And I think he might just be the Chargers head coach next season.
How do you feel that Sean Payton and Andy Reid have the same amount of championships?
I do have the same amount of championships. I have to look at like their winning percentage. I guess that would have to be a big difference.
Yeah, I don't know what their winning percentage.
I just think I think if I were to have the option between Andy Reid and Sean Payton as my head coach, I think a big thing for me with Andy Reid is that when he had Alex Smith, that Kansas City offense was still extremely good.
Yeah,
I think he can really scheme up with the best of them. If not, he is the best at it. And Kansas City's offense now is just absurd. It doesn't matter what the personnel is. He finds ways to create guys to get open. And I know it helps to have probably the most talented quarterback in NFL history at a team. But I still think Reid, to me, would be the guy you bench in that scenario.
All right. And our last one is start, bench, cut, rookie defensive standouts. So we got Sauce Gardner, Aiden Hutchinson, and Traquan Mullen.
So I'm going to start the guy that I, from the preseason and pre-draft process, told you was going to be, and I don't think you disagree, but Sauce Gardner is unbelievable. He's going to be a shutdown corner in this year for the league in the years to come. I love everything about him. I love the length, the athleticism, the attitude. He brings an edge to that Jets defense. I don't think they're quite as good without him. He has been everything as advertised since he's come out of Cincinnati. I love Sauce Gardner. He's the guy I'm definitely starting. The bench, this might surprise people because I actually think Aiden Hutchinson has really started to come into his own here these last couple of weeks. I think he's been a big part of that reason why the Detroit defense has looked better. But I'm going to have to start a bench Woodley. I think he gets overlooked a little bit as one of the better rookie corners. Again, because they play in Seattle, I think people kind of still tend to write them off a little bit. But he has been insane. He's a legit number one corner. I would say this year he's been a top 10 corner in the NFL this year. I've loved everything about him, his ability in zone and man. He's not afraid of anyone at the line. I love everything I've seen out of him in Seattle. Again, a great fifth-round find for the Seahawks. He's going to be a staple of that team for years to come, I do believe. And the guy I got to cut is Aiden Hutchinson. I really think Hutchinson has improved. I still think his pass rush needs a little bit of improvement in terms of his, hands, his skill, getting off the line, moving guys around a little bit more. There's kind of an embarrassing video against Teron Armstead, I think about like 3 or 4 weeks ago, where he's just holding him with one arm. But I guess it is Teron Armstead, and what are you going to do about that? But I think he's the guy I cut, and that's tough too because again, he's a playmaker on the defensive end. He's got like 2 or 3 interceptions, which is weird. He's a freak athlete. I think he's really going to grow into his own, and I think he's really improved already in the last couple of weeks itself.
I think it'll also really help it's very easy to discount Aiden Hutchinson, but he is by far the least amount of defensive talent around
him for sure. Like there's no one else really on the Lions defensive line that can help take a double team off of him.
No. And honestly, he's played pretty well against the run. He's shown a lot in the pass rush. He's really good in the screen game for some reason.
No, he's been I think that's one of the bigger areas that's jumped off to me is that when I watch the Lions, he recognizes screens very early. Clearly does his homework on that. Cause I feel like a lot of times, like even against Buffalo, against Chicago, there's been times where screen, he picks it out right away and he goes after it. It's a big difference.
For sure. Okay. So our next place that we're going to go is we did this last week. We drafted Super Bowl contenders, but this week we're going to draft MVP candidates.
Lovely.
So that's where we're going to start today. And I'll let Clark have the first pick again.
Oh, you're so generous. You're so kind to me. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
The first one again?
Sure. You can take the clear one.
Well, I think the first My first overall pick is very obvious. It's very similar to what my thought process on the first overall selection for the Super Bowl contenders. It's gonna be the guy that I picked from the team that I picked first overall. It's got to be Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
I believe this is already Patrick Mahomes' award to lose. I really don't know how anyone surpasses him over these next 6 weeks. I really don't see how it happens. He's playing at a god tier level. I mean, he's starting to enter the conversation. Well, not starting to, because there's a lot of career left, but he's looking like a guy that you could say at the end of his career, it's like, okay, this is the best ever to do it. So I think Mahomes is your clear number one. He's just everything you could ask for. He makes unbelievable plays every week. It's routine for him. He's got to be the number one pick in my eyes.
Yeah, that's where I would have went. That would have been my clear guy. I just think right now there's no one really playing better than him.
No.
I mean, I think this race is a little bit tighter than people are giving it credit for.
A touch, maybe a touch.
Because with my first overall pick, I think this is a guy who probably deserves to be in that conversation because he's played super well week in and week out, but he missed a couple of games, which is going to hurt him. My number one pick, I'm going to take Tua Tagovailoa.
Wow, really? Really?
Tua's leading in every efficiency stat.
I know.
Again, he's playing extremely, extremely well. And he's not just getting it done with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. He's finding guys all over the field. Jeff Wilson has actually really helped their offense to solidify it a little bit, take a little bit of the pressure off of him and give him some of that just way to keep it a little bit easier in the pocket. He's a winner right now. He's playing extremely well. So I got to go Tua with my first pick.
All right. I can respect it. I believe Tua is like third or fourth on Vegas's odds right now to win the MVP. I'm going to go with the guy who I thought you would have taken. Yeah. Because if it was like the AL and NL and the in baseball, in the NFL, this would be the clear guy. Jalen Hurts will be my second pick. I think Jalen Hurts is currently quarterbacking the record-wise best team in the NFL. He's doing it with both his arm and legs. He's shown some serious progression this season in both ways. I've loved everything I've seen out of him. A lot to like with Jalen Hurts. Again, I think it's going to help because the Eagles are going to be the clear number one seed. He's putting up godlike numbers because he's throwing to Devontae Smith. He's throwing to A.J. Brown. He's throwing to Dallas Goedert. He's throwing to Quez Watkins. And again, he runs the ball crazy efficiently. So I think for me, Jalen Hurts has to be my second overall pick in this one.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking about going there. But kind of based on, I mean, he ran the ball really well. But honestly, as the season has gone on, he's impressed me less and less with throwing the football. So maybe I was putting in a little personal bias off of the guy. But I just think Tua is a better thrower of the football right now. But with my number 2 pick, I'm going to take Joe Burrow.
Okay. Wow. All right.
I'm taking Joey B. I think Joe Burrow is playing at an extremely high level as well, and people aren't talking about it because Jamar Chase has been out for a little bit, and because his first 2 games were kind of horrendous.
Yep.
But after that very, very slow start, he has really picked it up and has become super efficient. He's been able to find his targets once they opened up the offense a little bit more. They've been able to find his spots. T. Higgins has been playing at a high level. He's been playing really well. They're targeting him a lot. He has had a couple mistakes here or there, drops, that kind of stuff. But overall, he's been really good. And the offense has just been moving really well.
I agree. I mean, again, I think Burrow's a guy I probably would have taken like third of my pick. I mean, again, I'm a Joe Burrow guy. Everyone knows that. But I think the guy, I guess if you're going to leave him out, I mean, I know he struggled, but I still think he's like the darling of things in terms of NFL MVPs. I'll take Josh Allen. I'll take Josh Allen with my third one. I know some people have fallen a little bit off the train because he hasn't played as well because of the elbow injury. But I still look at Josh Allen as a guy like, okay, if he gets this thing going again, then you're going to hear all the hype yet again. I mean, I think this is a guy, again, if we're looking at Vegas odds alone, he's inside the top 5. He's a guy that does everything, runs the ball crazy well. Like no one really expect that. I wish he would slide a little bit more for God's sake. And I think, again, although the elbow injury is still there are still throws he makes all the time. You were just like, my goodness, only Josh Allen and maybe Patrick Mahomes can make that throw. So again, he needs to get it going a little bit more. He needs to start bolstering things a little bit more, but I still think Josh Allen would be my third overall selection.
No, I mean, I like that pick. I just think Josh Allen has kind of taken himself out of the discussion over the last couple of weeks. I mean, 4 red zone interceptions over the last 3 games can
hurts.
Really hurt. especially with the way that some of these other guys are distancing. You're just not seeing the mistakes from the top 4 guys we've seen. So that's why I went Joe Burrow over Josh Allen.
Gotcha.
I'm also kind of worried about Josh Allen's injury. I'm not sure how that's going to continue to progress. Yeah. So where I'm going to go with my 5th pick is I really want to take a non-quarterback, but the MVP is just a quarterback.
Quarterback award at this point, man.
I know, but I really want to take a non-quarterback and be fun, but I'm not going to. I'm going to pick up a guy who I think has the best chance of, if he gets really hot, he could kind of get himself up there. This last game did not help the conversation, and its comments after the game I don't think helped the situation either. I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson.
I thought his comments were hilarious.
Well, I thought they were funny too, but I don't really think the old.
No, he probably shouldn't have said it. He probably shouldn't have said it, but it was just like.
I mean, it's the same thing with like Kyler Murray's comments after.
Yeah, the scheme was pretty fucked. That's what Kyler Murray said, dude. I was like, oh my God.
Can't believe you said that out loud. But yeah, Lamar, again, he's for some reason gets a ton of hate, and all the people saying that he's the reason they lost that game. Just get out of here. You're dumb.
They dropped like 3 touchdown passes. Mark Andrews dropped one, another tight end dropped one, and then Robinson dropped one at the end of the game.
I mean, it was just horrendous. I mean, Lamar is playing extremely well. Again, he's your prototypical running quarterback. They just need to put some weapons around him, and he would be so good, but they just decide not to.
Be great.
But yeah, that's where I'm going with my 3rd pick. Where are you going in the 4th round?
Well, 4th for me. It's a guy who I don't believe in at all, but he's a guy that constantly puts up numbers, and numbers is what gets you awards. The new nightmare. Get the man his chains. Kirk Cousins. He'll be my 4th overall pick in the NFL MVP draft. Look, I think Kirk, for all of his shortcomings in the playoffs and primetime games and when it matters, the dude does put on a light show when the clock strikes 1 o'clock on the East Coast Standard Time. Not a better guy out there possibly doing it. He puts up crazy. Again, he has Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, TJ Hawkinson, Dalvin Cook to deal with. He's got plenty of weapons to spread it around to, and he does do that. He does a good job of doing that. I just know when it comes down for him to actually win a very meaningful game, it's going to be the Kirk Cousins I've known my entire career since he got drafted at Michigan State. He's just not built for those kind of moments, I think, sadly. So I'll take him my 4th because, again, numbers win you awards, and he puts up numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I just can't really imagine him ever winning it.
No, I mean, I'm not saying that he could. I don't think that he will. I mean, I think realistically he could have better numbers than like 2 other guys, but they'll be like, well, that's Kirk Cousins. We can't give him the award.
I mean, that's what I would think if I were a voter. It'd be like when Derek Carr was technically in the MVP conversation.
Yeah, it's just like, you're not going to give it to him. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's exactly why like Geno Smith isn't ever going to win that award.
No, not at all.
But with my 4th pick, I'm going to go down to Dallas. I'm going to take Dak Prescott.
All right.
Probably the next highest performing quarterback that we haven't talked about yet. I think Dak, he plays in a very favorable city on a favorable team that people like to give votes to. If they gave it to defensive players, I would have went Micah Parsons because Micah Parsons is playing insane right now, but they don't do that. So I got to pick lousy Dak Prescott, who's probably being carried by his defense, because Cooper Rush was 4-0 with that team. But I'm going to take Dak. I don't really have much meaning to. I just feel like he's probably the best option left.
I like it. And you know what? Here, for our 5th pick, let's do one that's like fun. We'll do one that we think is a little bit different.
All right, we'll do a fun one.
So for my 5th pick, I would actually might have gone with this guy regardless. Tyreek Hill.
Oh, okay.
Tyreek Hill will be my 5th selection for NFL MVP. I think Tua has played great this season. I think he deserves every bit of credit that's come his way. Totally earned it, especially after that unbelievably scary injury in week 3 against Cincinnati. Totally earns everything. However, elite quarterbacks need elite weapons, and there might not be a more elite weapon in the NFL than Tyreek Hill. This is a guy who can take a 5-yard slant and go 80 yards to the house. This is a guy that runs circles around defensive backs. He's a huge difference maker in Miami. And I know Tua, again, he has totally progressed this season, but you cannot sit here and tell me adding Tyreek Hill to that offense has not unlocked him to another level. It's the same way that I felt like with Joe Burrow when they got Jamar Chase. Everyone's like, oh, it's just Jamar. No, it's the fact that you have a top-end talent to go with another top-end talent. That's how it works. I know people get latched on this idea that quarterbacks that can create anything, but they can't. They need highly skilled skill position players. And again, I don't think there's been a more important acquisition this entire NFL offseason than Tyreek Hill. He has totally changed how Miami does things. He has been astronomically important to that offense. He would be my 5th pick for the NFL MVP.
I really like that. Now, my 5th pick, a lot of people are going to laugh at, and it might be a recency bias thing. But I think if the NFL MVP actually considered who is the most valuable player on their team, I think it's Josh Jacobs. I think if you were to talk about the most valuable player to an offense, I think right now it is Josh Jacobs.
All right.
I think he just single-handedly won them a game.
He did.
So to me, if you're actually talking about a valuable player that is a non-quarterback, I don't really know if you can point anywhere else. Josh Jacobs has kept them in all of these games. He's the reason that they're even relevant. I mean, they're not really relevant, but I mean, he's the only reason that their offense at least moves the ball. Could you imagine
that they're
you know what
about?
I mean? Like, if they didn't have Josh Jacobs, that offense would be absolutely horrendous to watch.
Well, I mean, it would just be Devontae Adams at that point.
Yeah, but every once in a while, they like just get blinders to Devontae Adams and don't throw him the ball for 3
I know. Remember when everyone talked about Darren Waller? Everyone was like, Darren Waller's going to be good.
Hey, I was thinking about going back on a list. Let's just talk about it. Remember when I called Darren Waller the 6th best tight end in the league? And
that was totally valid. We both had Dallas Goedert ahead of him. And if Dallas Goedert hadn't been hurt, you know who was better than Darren Waller? Dallas Goedert.
I would still put Dallas Goedert ahead of Darren Waller right now.
I mean, Waller hasn't even he hasn't even been a part of this season in any degree. And all I heard about this lethal combination of Adams, Hunter Renfrow, and Darren Waller. You know how comical that was to begin with and how comical it is now that you really tried to pitch me that crap that those 3 dudes were going to make up some sort of crazy trio. God.
What's crazy is Josh Jacobs is probably more valuable than all 3 of them right now.
Yes, right now, I would agree.
I mean, Darren Waller really hasn't done anything. Hunter Renfrow has been...
He's on the IR. Both those guys are on the IR, I thought.
They are. But even when they were playing, they just weren't doing anything.
I mean, Renfrow was like the guy that Carr looked to every single time on 3rd down, any important part of a drive, and he's just like MIA, missing in action.
Yeah, gotta love Josh McDaniels.
Can't fire him, though, because you don't got any money to do anything else, man. You got to pay the guy.
I mean, this leads to an interesting discussion. Who do you think has been the most disappointing team in the league so far? Has it been the Raiders for you? Or Denver?
I mean, it's got to be a discussion between, I think, those 2 teams. I mean, those are 2 teams. I don't know what their number was at the beginning of the season in terms of the projection to win games, but those are 2 teams people I had heard say, like, Super Bowl capability. Like, these teams are stacked.
There's another one. I mean, Green Bay, the Rams. You could even throw the Chargers into that conversation, but they're above 500, so...
I don't know. I just think, like, again, I feel like the Rams, like, okay, I could get that. They won the Super Bowl last year. But the reality of the Rams is that it was a really great run, but it just really never resonated with me as in terms of, like, you know, some team is going to make it like 2 or 3 years of the same thing. I just think with Denver and Las Vegas, there was so much lodged into these 2. There was so much talked about with these 2 that it just felt like it had to be a slam dunk. And the reality is that it wasn't. Like, these 2 teams have faltered really badly, I feel like. And not only that, but they put themselves respectively in terrible financial situations. Denver can't get rid of Russell Wilson. The Raiders can't get rid of Josh McDaniels. There are 2 teams right now that are not only really bad right now, but because of how they handled their offseason, they're going to find themselves in a world of hurt for the next 2 years, probably.
I think another thing is that this offseason showed, and I don't know if this is the right message or the wrong message, is I think we're getting to the point where maybe reaching for a mid-tier quarterback is not worth the investment.
I mean, yeah.
Because, the Raiders can't get out of Derek Carr either.
No, I think what Denver thought that they were going to do is that they thought they were going to get Russell Wilson and have the same type of results that the Rams did last year when they got Matthew Stafford. I promise you that's what their thought process was.
For sure.
But I think the problem, too, that Denver's really had is that Nathaniel Hackett is a dud. He's a guy you have to fire. I don't think there's any reason in the world you give this guy a second chance.
No way.
I mean, you got to be talking. I mean, again, that stat that if they just scored 18 points in regulation, they would be like 9-2.
Yep.
Like, you're an offensive-minded guy. That's supposed to be your brainchild, and you can't do it. And it's not an excuse of not having weapons, not having a half-decent quarterback. You had all of those things, and you still couldn't make it happen.
The other thing is there's locker room issues as well. I mean,
Oh
what
my
is
God.
happening
Like,
with these running backs?
I mean, there's been so much out of Denver. It just feels like that is a franchise is in complete disarray right now, which is crazy because I think my entire life growing up, Denver has always been at the very least stable.
Yeah.
And now they're not even that.
No. I mean, the state of the AFC West going into next year is we could honestly be talking about them as one of the worst divisions of football.
I mean, I feel like it. Yeah. I mean, again, it's funny though to talk like just the AFC West, like all three of the Chargers, Raiders, Broncos threw in what, over $1 billion probably worth of investments.
Yeah.
To try to catch Kansas City. I think you said this last week, and it's over. It's completely over by week 11.
Yeah. No,
like,
it's
not even a conversation to be had.
It's insane. I mean, they tried to do it, and I want to be down on the Chargers a little bit and say that they're one of the most disappointing teams, but they're currently over 500.
6-5.
And they're still in the playoff hunt. And to tell you the truth, I actually think they're going to sneak in with a spot.
I think they are too. Look, again, I think with the Chargers, the biggest thing I still lean back on with the Chargers is that Justin Herbert exists.
Yeah.
As long as Justin Herbert exists, you have a chance. You have a shot.
The other thing is, again, we talked about this last week because it's just so prevalent, is the difference with Keenan Allen with this offense is just massive.
Keenan Allen, without getting the ball in the last play of the game, won them the game. He sucked up a double team, and they completely forgot about the guy direct to his right, Gerald Everett, and he won him the game.
I mean, that's the real power of Keenan Allen. Yeah. I mean, and he's so good. And I mean, the other thing is, even if you think about that play as they put the double team guy, well, then Herbert's just going to throw it to Allen, and they're still going to score.
Yeah.
Because then he just would have had a single team, and he gets separation. If you need him on a quick slant, he's going to do it 9 out of 10 times. But yeah, I mean, the other disappointing team is, I mean, for all the people saying that the Rams Super Bowl wasn't worth it for this hang up or whatever, you are out of your mind.
I think every team, I mean, I know people can say that, but I think any team would trade a lot for a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
A lot.
I mean,
I will say, I think the Rams appear to be very screwed moving forward because you already have like McVay talking about like just retiring. Like just being done. I mean, if Stafford continues to mount these injuries, I know he has a big family. I don't know how much longer he's going to want to take that on. I mean, Donald's already talked about retiring himself. Heck, he was threatening to do it right after the Super Bowl. So,
I mean, if I'm the Rams, to tell you the truth, I think I become massive sellers this offseason.
Oh, I would blow it up. I mean, look, I would Jalen Ramsey. I think the days of Jalen Ramsey being very feared are so far gone.
I mean, Travis Kelce cooked him.
I know, but I think it goes back to like the Super Bowl almost. Like Jamar and T. Higgins had their way with him. And it wasn't a thing where they were afraid to throw at him. They're like, you're there? Okay, cool. We're still throwing it there. And then last week might have been the final nail in the coffin for Jalen Ramsey. Travis Kelce abused him.
Yeah, I agree. I would trade him.
Sell high.
I would sell. I just don't know how high you can get him because you signed him to such a massive contract extension.
There's just plenty of guys around the team that you could probably get rid of. I mean, I think ultimately this is a team the way that it looks right now. I know you just won the Super Bowl last year, but there's not a lot right now to hang your hat on. I mean, Cooper Kupp's hurt. Matthew Stafford's hurt. You have everyone who's basically important to your team is hurt right now, and they're on big contracts, and they ain't getting younger.
Yeah.
You got to get rid of them. You got to start blowing things up and starting over again.
I think you might see them sell Cooper Kupp this offseason.
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
I think try to rep the picks because the other thing is they just have no hope because they have no early round picks. I mean, as much as the strategy worked to win a Super Bowl, and again, it's totally worth it to win a Super Bowl. If you
just
do
be cautious. Just know this is a very real possibility. When you sell everything in pursuit of one championship, if you get it, awesome. If you don't, you do have to live with this sometimes.
I mean, and then so we talked about their roster building, but another piece of roster building, and this goes back to the quarterback thing. The Packers kind of sold everything for Aaron Rodgers, and now look at where they're at.
Yeah, but I think they're in a better spot than I think other teams are.
But I'm saying, like, maybe I'm overreacting to the Jordan Love, but if they didn't sign Rodgers, they could have kept Adams with Jordan Love.
Yeah, I mean, you could have, but then again, I don't know. I agree, but I don't know how much you'd look back at that and regret.
But I just think when you drafted Love in the first round, at some point you had to know.
Yeah, I had to
we
know
have
you
to
were
give
giving him a shot.
and you had to give up on Rodgers at some point. I don't care whether he was a 2-time MVP. At some point, they had to move on or trade Jordan Love.
I agree.
I mean, they just couldn't keep both without these questions. And I think keeping both into the season is ultimately what kind of did them in.
I agree. 100%.
Because they're just paying these two quarterbacks. At some point, you had to make a decision on Jordan Love. At some point, you had to make a decision on Aaron Rodgers. They kept Rodgers, let Adams go out the door. Offense lacks weapons. And then their defense, I mean, no one's even talking about it, but their defense was supposed to be the best in the league, and that thing gets run over every single week.
They have not picked that up well. Not at all.
That thing gets run over every single week.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not impressive.
Not it. It's not it.
It's not it. Well, do you have any last takes? You have a hot take before we go for the day?
Hot take. I don't know if it's hot or not. United States, I need you guys to do a job against Iran tomorrow. Really need that. That might be one of the most cursed undertone political games I think I've ever seen in my entire life.
Oh, yeah.
The questions being asked to players is just preposterously laughable.
Also, to all the people that are like, oh, politics and sports don't mix. Get out of here.
Just watch this, dude. They had I think there was a reporter from Iran that said, have you asked the head coach of the U.S. You asked the United States to remove naval vessels from I was like, what? Why would he ever it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, again, sports and politics are inherently linked, especially when these teams represent entire countries. It's going to happen, and just get out of here. When you don't like a player's opinion, don't say that politics and athletes don't matter, because they clearly do.
No, and I think again, this is a totally different tangent, but I think the dumbest thing anyone has ever said is just be oh, they should just play their sport. No, I mean, they have a platform for a reason. They are entitled to their opinion, right or wrong, for whatever it is. And to say oh, you can't say X, Y, and Z about what you think politically, it's silly. I don't understand that notion that's gotten to.
I mean, again, I don't mean to go on a tangent here, and maybe it'll sound bad, but for all the people that are oh, athletes just need to play their sport, no. If you listen to Joe Rogan, what does Joe Rogan know that
Joe Rogan's an idiot too.
That all of a sudden
Joe Rogan idiot.
Well, he can have an opinion. He was a former comedian who became a wrestling announcer.
Yeah, now fraternity guys all over the world are did you listen to Joe Rogan, dude? That guy was totally spitting facts. I'm like, all right, dude. That was my this total rant. But that was my nightmare every single time I went out in college. Was oh, you listen to the Joe Rogan Experience? No, I didn't. I did not listen to the Joe Rogan Experience. Please don't tell me about his stupid interview with someone. I don't want to hear about it. He's a moron.
But again, if they believe that guy can have a platform, athletes can have platforms. They're on the same level to me.
All right.
Yeah. Well, that's been the show. Welcome to From the Backseat. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Make sure to follow us on TikTok. Make sure to follow us on Instagram. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube if that's what you're watching. If you're listening on all podcast platforms, make sure to leave us a rating. We are also available on audio platforms if you want to listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you find your podcast. Thanks for listening. And of course, join our chalkboard if you haven't joined our chalkboard yet. And thanks for being a part of the show. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Have a good night, y'all.